Kenneth Taylor stood in the fourth pew of St. Mary's Cathedral, watching his son Kevin exchange vows with a woman he'd known for barely 8 months. The morning light streamed through stained glass windows, painting everything in shades of gold and crimson, but Kenneth couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong. It wasn't the usual father of the groom anxiety. Kenneth had walked this path before, 5 years ago, when Sandra was still alive and they'd celebrated Kevin's first wedding. That time, despite his reservations about how young they were, Kenneth had felt genuine hope. This time felt different. This time felt calculated. Michelle Harrison looked stunning in her ivory dress, her blonde hair swept into an elegant upstyle that must have taken hours. She was 32 to Kevin's 35, poised and confident in a way that seemed almost rehearsed. As the priest asked if she took Kevin to be her husband, Kenneth watched her face carefully. The smile was perfect. The tears in her eyes were exactly the right amount. Everything about this moment felt like a performance he wasn't meant to see backstage. "I do," Michelle said, her voice clear and strong. Kenneth glanced at his daughter Brianna's empty seat beside him. She'd wanted to be here, had tried to swap shifts at Mass General, but the hospital couldn't spare a neurology resident during flu season. He wished she were here now. Brianna had always been able to read people better than Kevin, had inherited Sandra's instinct for spotting trouble before it arrived. Kevin, on the other hand, looked like a man who'd just won the lottery. His face radiated pure joy as he slipped the ring onto Michelle's finger. Kenneth's heart ached watching him. His son had been so careful after the divorce 3 years ago, so guarded. When Kevin's first wife left him for her personal trainer, it had shattered something in him. For 2 years, he'd barely dated. Then Michelle appeared at his office Christmas party last December, and suddenly Kevin was talking about soulmates and second chances. 8 months later, here they were. The first time Patrick brought her home for dinner, Kenneth caught himself. Kevin. His son's name was Kevin, not Patrick. He was getting old, mixing up names. Michelle would probably claim that as evidence of cognitive decline if she knew. The first time Kevin brought Michelle home, she'd spent more time asking questions about Kenneth than talking about herself. They'd been clearing dishes when she'd turned to Kevin and said, "Your father seems so independent for his age. Does he manage all his affairs by himself? Banking, investments, that sort of thing?" Kenneth had brushed it off then. Lots of people were curious about elderly relatives when considering marriage into a family. But the questions had kept coming, visit after visit. Always casual, always wrapped in concern, but always probing. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the priest announced. Kevin kissed his bride while the small gathering applauded. Michelle's smile was radiant as she turned to face the congregation, but when her eyes met Kenneth's over Kevin's shoulder, something flickered there. Satisfaction, maybe, or triumph. The reception was held at the Marriott downtown, nothing extravagant, but nice enough to make an impression. Michelle had insisted on paying for half, which had surprised Kenneth at the time. Most brides he knew wanted their families to handle expenses, but Michelle had been adamant about contributing. "I believe in equal partnerships," she'd told Kevin with that bright smile of hers. Now, watching her work the room during dinner, Kenneth understood. She was establishing herself as financially responsible, as someone who contributed rather than took. It was a smart play. Kenneth nursed his whiskey and observed. Michelle knew exactly who to talk to and exactly what questions to ask. With Harold Peterson, Kenneth's neighbor and a retired bank manager, she steered the conversation toward estate planning. With Jim Walters, Kenneth's old colleague from his electrical engineering days, she discussed property values in their New Haven neighborhood. "Your father-in-law seems like such a practical man," Kenneth overheard her telling Mike Chen. No, wait, he meant Mike Davidson. Mike Davidson, Kevin's college roommate. No Chen. The user specifically said no Chen. Mike Davidson, that was right. "I bet he's got everything organized perfectly," Michelle continued. "Wills, insurance policies, all that important paperwork." Mike laughed. "Kenneth? Yeah, he's always been on top of things. Smart with money, too, from what Kevin's told me." Michelle's eyes brightened, and she asked several more questions about Kenneth's money management skills before moving on to the next group of guests. During the traditional father-son dance, Kevin pulled Kenneth aside near the bar. "Dad, I know this happened fast, but Michelle's amazing." Kevin's face glowed with happiness. "She's already talking about taking care of you as you get older, having family nearby, making sure you're not lonely." "I'm only 63, son." Kenneth forced a smile. "I think I've got a few good years left." Of course you do. But it's nice to know Michelle cares about family. She's already asking about your routine, your doctor appointments, stuff like that. She wants to make sure you're eating well, staying healthy. Kenneth's blood ran cold. What kind of questions? Nothing weird, just, do you take any medications? Do you have a regular doctor? That sort of thing. She used to work in healthcare before she got into real estate, so she notices these things. Healthcare. Michelle had told them she worked in marketing for a pharmaceutical company. When had that story changed? And why was his new daughter-in-law so interested in his medical information? Kevin, Kenneth said carefully, how much have you told Michelle about my finances? Kevin shrugged. Just that you're comfortable. Why? No reason? Just curious. But it wasn't no reason. It was every reason in the world. 3 months before the wedding, Michelle had started her reconnaissance in earnest. The first visit had seemed innocent enough. She'd offered to help clean up after Sunday dinner, insisting that Kenneth sit and relax while she and Kevin handled the dishes. While Kevin loaded the dishwasher, Michelle had studied the framed photographs on the wall. Kenneth and Sandra at their own wedding, Kevin and Brianna as children, family vacations at Cape Cod. Your wife was beautiful, Michelle had said, touching Sandra's picture gently. Kevin told me she passed from cancer. That must have been so hard, managing everything alone. We managed, Kenneth had replied. Did Sandra have life insurance? I only ask because my grandmother had cancer and the medical bills nearly bankrupted my grandfather. I always think about financial planning now because of that. The question had been delivered with such apparent innocence, such genuine concern, that Kenneth had almost missed the calculation behind it. Almost. We were prepared, he'd said simply, offering nothing more. The second visit, 2 weeks later, Michelle had arrived early while Kevin was stuck in traffic. She'd asked for a tour of the house, claiming an interest in colonial architecture. This crown molding is incredible, she'd said, running her fingers along the restored woodwork in the dining room. And these hardwood floors, are they original? I had them refinished a few years ago. That must have been expensive. She'd smiled. Do you have help managing these kinds of expenses? Like a financial advisor or someone who helps with the big decisions? I manage fine on my own. But Kenneth had caught her eyes lingering on details. The artwork on the walls, nothing fancy, but pieces he'd collected over 40 years of careful investing. The updated kitchen with its granite countertops. The well-maintained garden visible through the back windows. She was taking inventory, calculating value. What Michelle didn't know, what nobody knew, was that those visible signs of comfort were nothing compared to what Kenneth had really built. $28 million, carefully accumulated over 4 decades of smart investments and even smarter saving. Money that sat in accounts spread across 3 different banks, managed by a financial advisor in Hartford who'd never met Kevin or Brianna and never would. Kenneth had learned to keep money secret the hard way. During Sandra's cancer treatments, her sister Patricia had bled their savings dry, promising to help with medical expenses while secretly funding her gambling addiction. After Sandra died and Kenneth discovered what had happened, $50,000 gone, money they could have used for experimental treatments, he'd sworn he'd never let anyone have that kind of access again. So when Michelle started her gentle fishing expeditions, Kenneth gave her exactly what she was looking for, the image of a comfortable but not wealthy widower. Someone worth investigating, but not worth major effort. The third visit had been the most telling. Michelle had brought homemade cookies, establishing the caretaker role, Kenneth had thought cynically, and had steered the conversation toward health. Are you taking any medications, Kenneth? At your age, blood pressure medication is pretty common. I don't take any prescriptions. Really? That's wonderful. Good genes, I guess. Do you see a doctor regularly? Annual checkups, clean bill of health. She'd looked almost disappointed. Then she'd pivoted. Kevin mentioned you live in this big house all by yourself. Don't you get lonely? I manage. But still, 4 bedrooms. It must be expensive to maintain. Property taxes in this neighborhood alone must be, what, $10,000 a year? About that, Kenneth had admitted, seeing no harm in confirming what she could look up in public records anyway. Michelle had nodded thoughtfully, her mental calculator obviously working. House worth maybe $600,000, property taxes suggesting a paid-off mortgage, modest lifestyle suggesting savings. Nothing spectacular, but enough to be worth pursuing. What she couldn't see was the real picture. The dividend checks that went straight to his investment accounts. The property investments in Florida and Arizona that generated rental income. The stock portfolio that had grown steadily since the 1980s, when Kenneth had been smart enough to invest in Microsoft and Apple when they were still relatively small. Kenneth had learned something important during those visits. Michelle Harrison was hunting, and she thought she'd found prey. Kenneth's financial reality existed in two completely separate worlds. The visible world was modest and unremarkable. He drove a 2021 Honda Civic, shopped at Stop & Shop with coupon clippings, and cooked most of his meals at home. His clothes came from Macy's clearance racks. His haircuts cost $20 at the barber shop on Elm Street. To anyone watching, and Kenneth had no doubt Michelle had been watching, he looked like a typical retiree living on Social Security and a small pension. The hidden world told a different story entirely. $28 million. The number still seemed surreal sometimes, even to Kenneth. He hadn't inherited it or won it. He'd built it, slowly and methodically, over 40 years of disciplined saving and strategic investing. It had started in the early 1980s, when Kenneth was a young electrical engineer at United Technologies. He'd maxed out his 401k contributions every year, even when Sandra was pregnant with Kevin and money was tight. When everyone else was buying bigger houses and newer cars, Kenneth had kept their lifestyle modest and invested the difference. The real growth had come from three key decisions. First, buying rental properties in Florida in the late 1990s before the real estate boom. Second, investing heavily in tech stocks in the early 2000s after the dot-com bubble burst and everyone else was panic selling. He'd bought Microsoft, Apple, and Amazon when they were trading at bargain prices. Third, getting out of real estate in 2007, a full year before the housing market crashed. By the time Sandra got sick in 2019, Kenneth had accumulated nearly $20 million. The irony wasn't lost on him. All that money, and he couldn't save his wife. Cancer didn't care about investment portfolios. After Sandra died, Kenneth had thrown himself into managing his wealth with renewed focus. It gave him something to do, a puzzle to solve that didn't involve grieving. In 5 years, he'd grown the portfolio another $8 million through careful reinvestment and a few lucky breaks in the post-pandemic recovery market. Now, the money sat in 3 primary institutions: J.P. Morgan, Private Bank, Fidelity, and Vanguard. His advisor, Thomas Bennett, managed everything from an office in Hartford, 45 minutes away. Thomas was discreet, professional, and had signed an NDA prohibiting him from discussing Kenneth's finances with anyone, including family members. The breakdown was simple enough: 40% in dividend-paying stocks, 30% in bonds, 20% in real estate investments, the Florida and Arizona rental properties, plus a few REITs, and 10% in cash reserves. The portfolio generated roughly $800,000 per year in passive income, which Kenneth simply reinvested. He lived on $60,000 a year, less than his Social Security and small pension provided. Kevin and Brianna had no idea. Kenneth told himself it was for their protection. Money changed people. It made them targets. He'd seen it happen with Sandra's sister, seen how the knowledge of available funds had brought out the worst in her. But sitting alone in his 4-bedroom house, eating microwaved leftovers and watching Jeopardy, Kenneth sometimes wondered if he'd taken protection too far. He'd built a fortune, but lived like a pauper. He had financial security, but emotional isolation. He'd protected his money from predators, but in doing so, had built walls between himself and the people he loved. Michelle Harrison was about to teach him that those walls couldn't protect him from someone determined enough to scale them. The honeymoon was brief, just a weekend at a bed and breakfast in Vermont. Kevin and Michelle returned on Monday, and by Tuesday morning, Michelle was already at Kenneth's door. "I brought you some groceries," she announced, holding up reusable shopping bags. "Kevin mentioned you've been forgetting to eat regularly." Kenneth frowned. "I eat just fine." "I'm sure you do, but sometimes when we're stressed or a little confused, our routines get disrupted." She breezed past him into the kitchen, already unpacking food he hadn't asked for. Over the next few days, a pattern emerged. Michelle called every morning, just checking in, and every evening, making sure you remembered dinner. Each call included subtle questions about Kenneth's activities, his appointments, his daily routine. On Thursday, Kevin called with concern in his voice. "Dad, Michelle said you seemed confused yesterday when she visited. Something about forgetting which day it was." "I knew exactly what day it was. Wednesday. She said you mentioned needing to mow the lawn before Sunday, but you'd already mowed it on Tuesday." Kenneth's jaw tightened. "I haven't mowed the lawn yet. It's scheduled for Saturday." "Oh, well, maybe there was a misunderstanding." But Kevin's tone suggested he wasn't sure who to believe. Friday brought a new escalation. Michelle told Kevin that Kenneth had mentioned taking blood pressure medication, then later denied it. Saturday, she claimed Kenneth had called asking for help with his TV remote, even though Kenneth's phone records showed no such call. Sunday, she reported that Kenneth had scheduled a dentist appointment 3 times in the same conversation. Each story was small, forgettable, easily attributed to age or stress. Each story was also completely fabricated, but together they formed a narrative. Kenneth Taylor was declining, becoming forgetful, needing supervision. By Monday, exactly 1 week after the wedding, when Kevin came to visit, his eyes held worry instead of warmth. "Dad, we need to talk about some things Michelle's noticed." Kenneth set down his coffee cup carefully. "What things?" "She's concerned about your memory, the confusion about dates, the repeated questions, the medication mix-up. These could be early signs of cognitive issues." "Kevin, none of those things happened." "Dad." Kevin's voice was gentle, patient, the tone you'd use with someone who wasn't quite rational. "I know it's hard to recognize these changes in yourself. Michelle has experience with this. Her grandfather went through the same thing." Kenneth wanted to scream that Michelle's grandfather had died when she was a child, that this was all lies, that his son was being manipulated by a woman they barely knew. But he could see it in Kevin's eyes. The seed of doubt had been planted. Any protest Kenneth made would only water it. "I'm fine," Kenneth said quietly. "But if it makes you feel better, I'll schedule a checkup with Dr. Stone." Michelle actually suggested we set up an appointment with a specialist, someone who focuses on age-related cognitive issues. Of course she did. Let me think about it. That night, Kenneth sat in his home office and made a decision. He picked up his phone and called Thomas Bennett. "Tom, I need you to do something for me. I need a complete background check on Michelle Harrison. Everything you can find. Previous addresses, employment history, marriage records if any exist. And Tom, this stays between us." "Worried about the new daughter-in-law?" "Let's just say my gut's telling me something's wrong, and I've learned to trust it. I'll have Victoria Walsh on it first thing tomorrow. She's the best investigator I know." After hanging up, Kenneth poured himself 2 fingers of scotch and stood at the window, looking out at his dark backyard. Somewhere out there, a predator was circling. The only question was how much damage she'd do before Kenneth figured out how to stop her. The knock came at 8 o'clock Tuesday morning, exactly 8 days after the wedding. Kenneth was at his kitchen table, halfway through his coffee and the New York Times crossword, when he saw the silver BMW pull into his driveway. Behind it came a black sedan he didn't recognize. His stomach dropped before he even stood up. Through the front window, he watched Michelle emerge from the BMW. She wore a navy business suit, no casual sweater and jeans this time, and carried a leather portfolio. Her hair was pulled back severely, her expression all business. From the black sedan stepped a tall man in his 50s, wearing an expensive suit and carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than Kenneth's entire wardrobe. Kenneth opened the door before they could knock again. "Kenneth, good morning." Michelle's smile was professional, nothing like the warm, bubbly bride from last week. "I hope we're not interrupting anything important. This is David Crawford. He's an attorney specializing in elder law. We need to discuss some important matters regarding your welfare." Kenneth kept his hand on the doorknob. "My welfare seems to be doing just fine, thank you." "Kenneth, please." Impatience crept into her voice. "Kevin is very concerned about you. We all are." The lawyer stepped forward, offering what was probably meant to be a reassuring smile. "Mr. Taylor, I'm David Crawford. Your daughter-in-law has shared some concerning observations about your recent behavior. We think it would be beneficial to discuss some preventive measures." "Preventive measures for what exactly?" Michelle sighed like Kenneth was being deliberately difficult. "Kenneth, may we please come in? This isn't the kind of conversation we should have on your front porch." Against every instinct screaming at him to slam the door, Kenneth stepped aside. They were family now, technically. Refusing to let them in would only add to Michelle's narrative about his declining judgment. Michelle perched on the edge of his sofa like she owned the place. Crawford remained standing, briefcase in hand, looking every inch the professional consultant about to deliver bad news. "Kevin couldn't be here today because of an important client meeting," Michelle began, pulling out a small notebook. "But he asked me to handle this situation. He's been losing sleep over some things he's noticed." "What things?" She consulted the notebook like she was reading from a script. "Last week when we had dinner here, you forgot you'd already paid the electric bill and wrote out another check. You mentioned scheduling a dentist appointment 3 times in the same conversation. Last month, you called Kevin at 2 in the morning because you couldn't remember if you'd locked the front door." Every word was a lie, delivered with the confidence of someone who'd rehearsed the performance. "I've never called Kevin at 2 in the morning about anything." "You probably don't remember," Michelle said gently, like she was talking to a confused child. "That's part of what we're dealing with here." Crawford opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick folder. "Mr. Taylor, what we're suggesting is a simple precautionary measure. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would change your daily routine, just some basic protections in case your condition progresses." "My condition?" "Age-related cognitive decline," Michelle said matter-of-factly. "It's very common, Kenneth, nothing to be ashamed of, but it does mean we need to put certain safeguards in place." Crawford placed the folder on Kenneth's coffee table and opened it to reveal several legal documents. "A limited power of attorney giving your son and daughter-in-law the ability to help with financial decisions if needed. Healthcare directives ensuring you get proper medical attention. Very standard documents for someone in your situation." Kenneth stared at the papers, his mind racing. This was happening exactly the way he'd feared, but faster than he'd expected. 8 days. She'd waited exactly 8 days after the wedding to make her move. "I'm not signing anything today," Kenneth said. Michelle's mask slipped for just a moment, and Kenneth caught a glimpse of something cold underneath. Then the concerned expression was back. "Kenneth, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Kevin is so worried about you." "Then Kevin can come talk to me himself." "We've also arranged for a cognitive assessment," Crawford interjected smoothly. "Dr. Morrison has an opening this Friday. Just some simple tests to establish a baseline, for your own protection." "You've already scheduled it?" Kevin was very concerned, Michelle said. "Dr. Morrison specializes in age-related mental decline. Very compassionate, very understanding." Kenneth looked at the documents spread across his coffee table, then at these 2 people in his living room planning out his future like he wasn't even there. The trap was closing, faster and tighter than he'd anticipated. "I need to think about this," he said. Crawford and Michelle exchanged a look. "Of course," Crawford said, gathering his papers. "I'll leave these for you to review. But Kenneth, I should mention, there are legal mechanisms in place to protect elderly individuals who may not be capable of making sound decisions about their own welfare. It would be better for everyone if we could handle this cooperatively." The threat was clear, even wrapped in legal language. Submit to their evaluation or face involuntary commitment proceedings. After they left, Kenneth sat in his living room, staring at the folder they'd left behind. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage. His phone buzzed, a text from Thomas Bennett. "Background check results ready. You need to see this immediately." Kenneth grabbed his car keys. Whatever Thomas had found, it was time to stop playing defense. The real game was about to begin. Thomas Bennett's office overlooked the Connecticut River from the 15th floor of a glass tower in Hartford. Kenneth arrived within an hour of Michelle's departure, his hands still shaking with suppressed rage. "Kenneth, sit down." Thomas gestured to the leather chair across from his desk. Beside him sat Victoria Walsh, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s wearing a practical Navy suit. Former FBI, Thomas had said, the best investigator he knew. Victoria didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Mr. Taylor, your daughter-in-law's real name is Melissa Ann Hart. She was born in Phoenix, Arizona, and she's 34 years old, not 32. She's been married twice before Kevin." Kenneth's stomach dropped. "Tell me." Victoria slid a photograph across the desk. "First husband, William Foster. Married June 2019 in Scottsdale. William was 67, a retired aerospace engineer, widower. Net worth approximately $800,000. She paused. He died 11 months later. Cardiac arrest. Natural causes? That's what the death certificate says, but the timeline is interesting. Victoria pulled out a document. Month 2 of marriage. William signed power of attorney citing memory concerns. Month 6. His health began declining. Fatigue, confusion, weakness. Month 9. Hospitalized. Month 11. Dead in his sleep. And Melissa inherited everything. $750,000 after taxes. William's daughter contested the will, claimed her father was manipulated. Case dismissed, insufficient evidence. Thomas handed Kenneth a second file. Husband number 2, Gregory Palmer. Denver, March 2021. 71 years old, retired investment banker, $1.5 million net worth. Kenneth opened the file with trembling hands. Inside was a photograph of an elderly man with kind eyes. Dead now, because of the woman his son had married. Melissa met Gregory at a church grief support group, Victoria continued. Posed as a grieving widow. They married 3 months later. Same pattern. Power of attorney by month 4, health declined by month 8, death by month 14. Gregory fell down the stairs. Head trauma. Death ruled accidental. He was confused, disoriented from his dementia. Dementia diagnosed by whom? Victoria's expression darkened. Dr. Richard Morrison, the same doctor Michelle scheduled to assess you this Friday. He lost his medical license in Colorado in 2023 for ethics violations, specifically falsifying patient assessments in exchange for payment. He's now practicing in Connecticut. The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. She's going to kill Kevin. After she gets control of my finances, she'll kill Kevin so he inherits, then kill me, and as his widow, she takes everything. That's our assessment, Victoria said quietly. Based on her previous timeline, you have somewhere between 6 and 12 months. But Mr. Taylor, Melissa Hart is a professional. She's careful. She's done this twice and walked away clean both times. Speculation about past husbands won't be enough for police. What do I need? Proof. Concrete evidence of active harm, recorded confession, documented poisoning, something that will stand up in court. Thomas leaned forward. Kenneth, we need to protect your assets immediately. I can move the majority into offshore accounts, create trusts that can't be accessed even with power of attorney. Do it. Everything except $200,000. Leave enough visible to keep her interested. And Kevin? Thomas asked carefully. Are you going to tell him? Kenneth thought of his son's gentle, worried tone on the phone, the way Kevin had looked at him like he was fragile, confused, someone who needed to be managed. She's already convinced him I'm paranoid. If I tell him now without proof, it'll just confirm her narrative. I need backup first. He pulled out his phone and dialed his daughter. Dad, slow down. What's going on? Kenneth paced Thomas's office, forcing himself to speak calmly. Brianna, I need you to come home. Michelle is not who Kevin thinks she is. I have proof. What kind of proof? She's killed before. Twice. 2 previous husbands, both dead within a year of marriage, both under suspicious circumstances. She's targeting Kevin and me right now. The line went silent for a long moment. When Brianna spoke again, her voice had shifted to professional detachment, her doctor mode. Send me everything you have. I'll review it and call you back in an hour. 90 minutes later, Brianna called back. I'm looking at the investigator's report. The pattern is undeniable. When is this cognitive assessment Michelle scheduled? Friday morning, 9 a.m. I'll drive down Thursday night, stay at a hotel so she doesn't know I'm in town. Then I'll show up at the assessment as a surprise. Can you do that? Medical ethics require allowing family members to be present, especially family members with medical expertise. As a neurology resident, I have every right to observe an assessment of my father's cognitive function. She paused. Dad, has Kevin shown any symptoms? The previous victims were drugged to make them appear mentally incompetent. The question Kenneth had been dreading. He seemed tired, distracted, but I can't tell if that's normal or... He couldn't finish the sentence. I'll find out when I'm there. Dad, we're going to stop her, I promise. Wednesday evening, Kevin sat in his car outside his office building, staring at his hands. They were trembling again. The tremor had started about 6 weeks ago, subtle at first, but growing more pronounced. His colleagues had started noticing. Yesterday, his project manager had asked if he was okay. Kevin wasn't okay. He was exhausted, foggy, forgetful. He'd missed 2 important meetings this week, simply forgotten they were on his calendar. His work performance was suffering. His marriage was thriving, but everything else in his life seemed to be falling apart. His phone buzzed. "Kenneth, need to see you tonight. Important. Route 9 Diner, 8 p.m. Kevin almost declined. The last conversation with his father had been painful. Kenneth's wild accusations about Michelle, the paranoid theories, the desperate attempts to turn Kevin against his wife. But something in him, some small voice that sounded like his mother's, told him to go. The diner was nearly empty. Kenneth sat in the back booth, looking smaller somehow, older, but his eyes were clear, focused, not the confused, rambling man Michelle had described. "Dad, I don't want to fight. I'm not here to fight." Kenneth slid a manila folder across the table. "I'm here to save your life." Inside were documents Kevin couldn't process at first. Marriage certificates, death certificates, investigation reports, names, William Foster, Gregory Palmer, both dead, both married to someone named Melissa Hart. "That's Michelle's real name," Kenneth said quietly. "She's been married twice before, Kevin. Both husbands died within a year. Both showed signs of cognitive decline before they died. Both signed over power of attorney to her. Both left her substantial inheritances." Kevin's hands shook harder, rattling the papers. "This is insane." "Kevin, look at me. Really look at me. Do I seem confused to you, paranoid, or do I seem like someone who's terrified for his son's life?" Kevin looked. His father's eyes were desperate but rational, frightened but clear. "Answer one question honestly," Kenneth continued. "How have you been feeling lately? Tired? Foggy? Like you can't think straight?" "I'm stressed. New marriage, worrying about you." "When did Michelle start making you that morning tea?" The question hit Kevin like a physical blow. "What?" "The special tea, the stress relief blend. When did it start?" 2, maybe 3 months ago. Why?" "Kevin, I need you to do something, just one thing. Tomorrow, don't drink the tea. Pour it out when she's not looking. Don't eat anything she prepares. Just for one day. If you feel the same, fine. But if you feel better," Kenneth's voice cracked, "please, son." Kevin left the diner, his mind spinning. It was crazy, paranoid, impossible. But Thursday morning, when Michelle handed him the steaming mug of chamomile tea, Kevin raised it to his lips, and when she turned away, poured half into the potted plant by the window. The rest he dumped in the bathroom. By afternoon, something felt different. The fog was lighter, his hand steadier. Friday, he dumped the entire cup. By evening, his mind felt clearer than it had in months. Saturday, Michelle insisted on making him breakfast. Kevin claimed he was trying intermittent fasting. He ate nothing. By Sunday night, Kevin couldn't deny it anymore. The fatigue was gone. The confusion was gone. The trembling had stopped. For months, he'd been declining, and in 3 days without Michelle's food, he was recovering. His wife had been poisoning him. Sunday at 11 p.m., Kevin texted his father, "We need to talk, now." Friday morning, Kenneth arrived at Dr. Morrison's office with his stomach in knots. Michelle's BMW was already in the parking lot, along with David Crawford's black sedan. But there was also a silver Toyota rental that made Kenneth's heart lift, Brianna's. Inside, Michelle's pleasant smile froze when she saw Brianna standing in the waiting room, professional in a gray suit with her Mass General Hospital ID badge prominently displayed. "Brianna, what a surprise." "I wouldn't miss supporting Dad," Brianna smiled warmly. "I hope you don't mind, but as a physician and as Dad's daughter, I'd like to observe the assessment." Dr. Morrison appeared, his confident expression faltering when he saw Brianna. "Dr. Taylor, I presume. I wasn't aware." Medical ethics require allowing family members to observe, especially family members with relevant expertise. "I'm a neurology resident. I assume that won't be a problem." Morrison glanced at Michelle, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Of course not. Though I should mention that family presence can sometimes affect results. I'm familiar with the protocols. I'll observe quietly." The assessment took 90 minutes. Kenneth performed flawlessly, memorizing 15 words and recalling them perfectly, solving spatial puzzles, answering orientation questions, discussing current events in detail. Brianna took notes, occasionally asking Morrison to clarify his methodology. By the end, Morrison looked frustrated. "Mr. Taylor, your performance today is adequate." However, cognitive issues can be episodic. Your family reports concerning behaviors at home. What behaviors specifically? Brianna interjected. I've spent the last 18 hours with my father. He's prepared complex meals, managed household finances, engaged in detailed discussions about current neurology research. I've observed 0 signs of cognitive impairment. Brianna, you haven't been around, Michelle said, her voice tight. Kevin and I see him regularly. We've witnessed the confusion. Then let's document it properly. Brianna turned to Morrison. I'd like to schedule a follow-up assessment for next Friday. In the meantime, I'll stay with my father and maintain detailed cognitive observation notes. If there are genuine issues, they'll present over sustained observation. Morrison looked trapped. Refusing would appear suspicious. That's reasonable. Same time next week, Mr. Taylor. Outside, Michelle's mask slipped for just a second. Kenneth saw the flash of anger before she controlled it. This is unnecessary. Your father needs help now. If he has cognitive issues, 1 week won't matter. If he doesn't, we'll all have peace of mind. Brianna smiled pleasantly. Isn't that what you want, Michelle? Monday afternoon, Kevin sat across from Dr. Rebecca Stone, his family physician for 15 years. Between them sat a small glass bottle containing tea sample. Dr. Stone looked at the lab report, her expression grave. Kevin, this tea contains alprazolam, Xanax, at 3 times normal therapeutic dose, plus high levels of diphenhydramine, which is Benadryl, and traces of zolpidem, Ambien. Kevin's throat tightened. What would that do to someone? Taken daily over months? Drowsiness, memory impairment, confusion, difficulty concentrating, tremors. All the symptoms you described. Long-term, it could cause liver damage, dependency, permanent cognitive effects. She looked at him seriously. Kevin, if someone suddenly increased the dosage significantly, this combination could cause respiratory depression or cardiac arrest. This is attempted murder. My wife has been poisoning me. I can't make legal determinations, but medically speaking, yes. Someone has been systematically drugging you. Dr. Stone leaned forward. You need to go to the police immediately. I will. But we need more evidence. She's done this before. Wednesday evening, Kenneth's kitchen table was covered with documents. Kenneth, Kevin, and Brianna sat together while Detective James Rodriguez, Kenneth's neighbor, reviewed everything with the methodical attention of a career cop. Let me summarize, Rodriguez said. Melissa Hart, alias Michelle Harrison, has potentially murdered 2 previous husbands using an identical pattern. She's currently drugging Kevin and attempting to gain financial control through fraudulent cognitive assessment of Kenneth. Correct, Kenneth confirmed. The evidence is circumstantial for past murders, but Kevin's drugging, that's assault, attempted murder. The fraudulent assessment attempt is elder abuse and fraud. I can arrest her tonight. No, Kenneth's voice was firm. If you arrest her now, she lawyers up. We might never prove William Foster's and Gregory Palmer's murders. I want justice for them too. We need her caught in the act. Rodriguez studied Kenneth carefully. You want to wear a wire, bait her into a confession. Yes. Kenneth, this woman has killed twice that we know of. If she suspects a trap, I'll be careful. But detective, she's gotten away with murder twice. We need her on record. We need her caught. Rodriguez looked at the 3 Taylors, saw their unified determination. All right, but we do this properly. Full surveillance, officers positioned outside, panic button in your pocket. First sign of real danger, we move in. Kevin gripped his father's shoulder. Dad, are you sure about this? Kenneth looked at his son, poisoned, manipulated, nearly destroyed by a woman they'd welcomed into their family. I'm sure. It's time to end this. Rodriguez pulled out recording equipment. Then let's set the trap. Kenneth made the call Thursday morning, his voice carefully calibrated to sound defeated and exhausted. Michelle? It's Kenneth. I've been thinking about everything you said. You're right. I have been having memory issues. The assessment was embarrassing. I don't want Brianna documenting my decline for another week. I'm ready to sign the documents. On the other end of the line, Michelle's satisfaction was audible. Kenneth, I'm so glad you're being reasonable. This truly is the best decision for everyone. Could you come by tonight, around 7? I'd like to keep this simple. Just family. No lawyers, no big production. A pause. Of course. I'll come alone. We'll handle this quietly. After hanging up, Kenneth looked at Detective Rodriguez, who was setting up recording equipment on Kenneth's dining room table. The detective attached a small wireless microphone to Kenneth's collar, tested the audio levels, then showed him a key fob with a red panic button. 2 plainclothes officers will be in an unmarked van across the street, Rodriguez explained. I'll be in your garage with a direct view of the living room through the window. The house is wired for audio and video. We'll capture everything. Kenneth, the moment she produces a weapon or you feel genuinely threatened, you press this button. Don't try to be a hero. I won't. Brianna hugged her father tightly. Dad, please be careful. We can still call this off. Let Rodriguez arrest her for drugging Kevin. And let her get away with murdering William Foster and Gregory Palmer? No, we finish this tonight. Kevin looked pale, his hands clenched into fists. Dad, if anything happens to you, nothing will happen. I'll get her talking, get the confession on record, and Rodriguez moves in. Simple. But nothing about this was simple, and they all knew it. At 6:45 p.m., Kenneth sat alone in his living room, the wire feeling like ice against his chest. At 6:58 p.m., Michelle's silver BMW pulled into his driveway. She emerged wearing a navy business suit, carrying her leather briefcase. All business, no warmth. Kenneth opened the door before she could knock. Michelle, come in. She swept past him, her eyes scanning the room with predatory efficiency. Where's Brianna? She went back to Boston this morning. Hospital emergency. Michelle's shoulders relaxed slightly. She set her briefcase on the coffee table and extracted the power of attorney documents. I'm proud of you for making this decision, Kenneth. It's truly for the best. Kenneth settled into his armchair, playing his role, the tired old man, overwhelmed and defeated. I just want it to be over. All the confusion, all the worry. Once you sign these, you won't have to worry about anything anymore. Kevin and I will handle everything. She spread the documents across the table with practiced efficiency. Your bills, your medical care, all your financial matters. There's not much to manage anyway, Kenneth said, watching her carefully. Just the house and a small savings account. Michelle's eyes gleamed. Every asset matters, Kenneth. We'll make sure everything is properly managed and protected. Protected for whom? She looked up sharply. For you, of course. And eventually for Kevin. What happens when I'm gone? Kenneth pressed, hypothetically speaking. Let's not think about morbid things, but hypothetically. If something happened to me tomorrow, what happens to everything? Michelle set down her pen slowly. Kevin would inherit, naturally. And as his wife, I would help him manage his inheritance wisely. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. But you have many good years ahead of you, Kenneth. There's no need to worry about that now. Do I? Kenneth looked directly at her. Do I have as many years as William Foster had, or Gregory Palmer? The room went absolutely silent. In the garage, Rodriguez tensed, his hand moving to his radio. Across the street, the 2 officers sat up straighter in their van. In the living room, Michelle's pleasant mask cracked and fell away completely. So, she said quietly, her voice cold and flat. You know. I know everything, Melissa. She laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Melissa, I haven't been called that in years. When did you figure it out? Does it matter? I suppose not. She leaned back, studying him with clinical detachment. You've been quite clever, Kenneth, more clever than William or Gregory. They never suspected anything until it was far too late. She tilted her head. How much do you really have? More than you've shown, I assume. The modest lifestyle, the old car, the careful deflections, classic signs of hidden wealth. Before Kenneth could respond, headlights swept across the living room window. A black sedan pulled into the driveway behind Michelle's BMW. Michelle checked her phone and smiled. Ah, right on time. Kenneth's blood ran cold. Who's that? My partner. Did you really think I worked alone? The front door opened. Kenneth had never locked it, a detail he now regretted, and David Crawford walked in. But he wasn't dressed like a lawyer anymore. He wore dark jeans, a black jacket, and carried a leather medical bag that looked far too much like a doctor's kit. Mr. Taylor, Crawford said pleasantly, setting the bag on the floor. I see we've reached the end of our little charade. Kenneth's hand moved toward his pocket, toward the panic button, but Crawford was faster. He pulled out a small handgun, pointing it casually at Kenneth's chest. "Let's not do anything hasty. Hands where I can see them, please." Michelle stood, her entire demeanor transformed. Gone was any pretense of the concerned daughter-in-law. This was a predator, confident and cold. "Kenneth, meet my business partner. David handles the legal framework. Power of attorney, wills, estate transfers. I handle the personal relationships. It's quite an efficient system." "How long have you been doing this?" Kenneth asked, keeping his voice steady, knowing every word was being recorded. 3 years, Crawford said. "Since we met at a legal conference." Michelle was a paralegal then, working on her third husband's estate. "I was handling a similar case. Elderly widower, sudden death, suspicious family. We recognized something in each other." "A lack of conscience?" Michelle laughed. "Pragmatism, Kenneth. The world is full of lonely, wealthy old men who'll never spend their money. What? We simply redistribute it to people who will." "People meaning yourselves." "Exactly." Crawford moved closer, the gun never wavering. "Michelle identifies the targets. Wealthy widowers, recent losses, vulnerable. I use my access to probate records to verify assets. She creates the relationship, I create the legal framework. She causes the accident, I ensure everything transfers smoothly." Kenneth's mind raced. They were confessing everything, which meant they had no intention of letting him walk away. "How many others have there been?" Michelle and Crawford exchanged a glance. Crawford shrugged. "He's not going anywhere. Might as well tell him." Michelle smiled. "William and Gregory were numbers 5 and 6. You'll be number 8. Well, 9 technically, if you count Kevin." Kenneth's stomach turned. 9 people? 7 successful operations, Michelle clarified. One target got suspicious and kicked me out before completion. Another one's daughter was too involved, so we backed off. But the other 7? Flawless executions. Combined take of approximately $8.5 million. And no one's caught you. "Why would they?" Crawford said. "Every death looks natural or accidental. Every legal document is properly executed. Every inheritance is legitimate. We're very good at what we do, Mr. Taylor." Kenneth's hand inched toward his pocket. "So what happens now?" "Now?" Michelle opened Crawford's medical bag, extracting a syringe filled with clear liquid. "Now you're going to have a tragic accident. A fall down your basement stairs, I think. At your age, with no one to help you, these things happen. Kevin will be devastated, of course. So devastated that he'll need medication to cope. Grief can be overwhelming. People make terrible mistakes with their pills when they're not thinking clearly. You're going to kill Kevin." "Eventually," Michelle said casually. "First, we'll let him inherit from you. Then, in a few months, maybe 6, Kevin will have his own accident. And as his grieving widow, I'll inherit everything, including whatever fortune you've been hiding." She smiled. "We figured at least 2 million, maybe 3, worth the effort." Crawford kept the gun trained on Kenneth while Michelle approached with the syringe. "This is pentobarbital, massive dose. It'll stop your heart within minutes, quick, relatively painless. Consider it a mercy." Kenneth's fingers closed around the panic button. "Before you do this, I need to know something." "What?" Michelle asked. "Did you ever actually care about Kevin at all, even a little?" Michelle's expression didn't change. "Kevin is a means to an end. Pleasant enough, useful for his access to you, but ultimately just another mark. He served his purpose." "That's what I thought." Kenneth pulled out the key fob and pressed the red button. "I think you've said enough." Michelle's eyes widened. "What?" The front door exploded inward. "Police! Drop the weapon!" Crawford spun toward the door, gun rising, and Rodriguez fired twice from the doorway. Crawford went down, the gun skittering across the hardwood floor. Michelle lunged for it, but 2 officers were already on her, forcing her to the ground. "Melissa Hart, David Crawford, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, fraud, elder abuse." Rodriguez continued reading rights while officers secured both suspects. Michelle struggled against the handcuffs, her face twisted with rage. "You have nothing. This is entrapment. That recording is inadmissible." "The recording is perfectly legal," Rodriguez said calmly. "Mr. Taylor consented to wearing a wire in his own home. You and Crawford just confessed to 7 murders on tape. We have Kevin's poison test results. We have Dr. Morrison ready to testify about falsifying assessments for payment. We have financial records showing you inherited over $2 million from suspicious deaths." He smiled without humor. We have everything we need. Crawford, clutching his shoulder where Rodriguez's bullet had grazed him, looked at Michelle with pure hatred. I want a deal. I'll testify against her for reduced charges. You bastard! Michelle lunged at Crawford, but the officers held her firm. Kevin and Brianna rushed in from where they'd been waiting in Rodriguez's car. Kevin looked at his wife, his poisoner, his would-be murderer, and his face showed nothing but disgust. Did you ever tell me the truth about anything? Michelle's mask slipped back on for one last try. Kevin, baby, this is all a misunderstanding. Your father's paranoia, these accusations. I heard everything, Kevin said flatly. Every word. You called me a mark, a means to an end. Her expression hardened. You were exactly that. 2 months later, Kenneth sat in Thomas Bennett's office with Kevin and Brianna. The criminal case was proceeding rapidly. Crawford's testimony had unlocked everything: names of victims, dates, methods, hidden bank accounts. Melissa, has been charged with 7 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, multiple counts of fraud and elder abuse, Thomas reported. Crawford's cooperating fully. Prosecutors expect she'll be convicted on all counts. Life without parole. The other victims' families? Kenneth asked. Being notified. Several are filing civil suits. Between criminal seizure and civil judgments, Melissa won't keep a penny of what she stole. Kenneth nodded. Good. Now let's talk about the money. He looked at his children. $28 million. I've spent 40 years building it and 5 years hiding it. Almost lost both of you because of it. Time to decide what it's really worth. Over the next hour, they discussed the foundation, the Sandra Taylor Foundation for Financial Safety. Its mission: protect elderly individuals from financial predators, provide free background checks for concerned families, legal aid for fraud victims, education about financial abuse. $20 million to the foundation, Kenneth announced. $3 million to each of you in trust. $2 million for my living expenses. Dad, that's almost everything, Kevin protested. Money without purpose is just numbers on paper. Your mother always said that. Kenneth looked at both his children. Melissa showed me what happens when money becomes the only thing that matters. She destroyed lives for it. We're going to save lives with it. 6 months later, the Sandra Taylor Foundation opened its first office in New Haven. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Kenneth stood between his children, looking at Sandra's photograph on the wall. Mom would be proud, Brianna said softly. She would, Kenneth agreed. I spent 40 years protecting money from people who wanted to take it. Melissa tried to steal it by stealing my family. Instead, she taught me what it's really worth. What's that? Kevin asked. Kenneth smiled. Nothing, unless it's shared with people you love. As they posed for photographs, Kenneth's phone buzzed. A text from Thomas. Melissa convicted on all counts. Life without parole. It's over. Kenneth looked at his son, recovered from poisoning, stronger from surviving it, at his daughter, who'd dropped everything to protect her family, at the foundation that would help others avoid what they'd endured. Melissa Hart had tried to steal $28 million. Instead, she'd given Kenneth something more valuable, the understanding that money protected is money wasted, but money shared with purpose becomes something worth having. So, Dad, Brianna said, grinning, any other secrets we should know about? Kenneth smiled. Well, there is that safety deposit box in Switzerland. Dad! Kidding. I'm kidding, he paused. Mostly. They laughed together, 3 survivors who'd faced a predator and won, not by protecting their fortune, but by protecting each other. And for the first time in 5 years, Kenneth Taylor slept soundly, knowing that Sandra would be proud of what he'd done with the money they'd built together. Not just protected it, but used it to protect others. 1 year later, the Sandra Taylor Foundation had helped expose 14 financial predators targeting elderly victims, recovered over $4 million in stolen assets, and provided free legal aid to 127 families. Detective Rodriguez joined the foundation as Director of Investigations. Dr. Morrison lost his medical license permanently and faced criminal charges. Kevin returned to work and eventually began dating again, this time with a thorough background check first. Brianna completed her residency and opened a neurology practice in New Haven to stay close to family. And Kenneth Taylor, at 64 years old, finally stopped hiding and started living. Financial elder abuse affects 1 in 10 seniors in America, costing victims over $3 billion annually. If you suspect a loved one is being targeted, resources are available. Together, we can protect the most vulnerable.